The months that followed were transformative, not just for Elijah and Charles, but for countless lives touched by harvesting hope. What had begun as a small effort to uplift struggling farmers had grown into a global movement, uniting communities and inspiring change on an unprecedented scale. The initiative's success was undeniable, with fields once barren now bursting with crops, families once burdened by debt now thriving, and entire regions revitalized by sustainable practices. Elijah watched it all unfold with quiet pride, though he never claimed credit for any of it. To him, the real heroes were the farmers themselves, the men and women who worked tirelessly under the sun, nurturing their land and feeding the world. He saw his role simply as someone who had helped light the way, sharing tools and knowledge that others could use to build better futures. Charles, too, found himself changed by the experience. For years, he had poured his energy into building a business empire, driven by ambition and a desire to leave a legacy. But meeting Elijah had shifted his perspective. Now, instead of focusing solely on profits, he dedicated himself to projects that improved lives and protected the planet. Together, he and Elijah became a powerful team, two very different men united by a shared vision of hope and resilience. One crisp spring morning, Elijah stood at the edge of his field, watching as a group of volunteers installed solar panels atop the barn roof. These panels would power not only his farm, but also serve as a model for renewable energy solutions in rural areas. It was another step forward in the mission to make agriculture more sustainable, a mission that grew stronger with each passing day. Maria approached him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You've done good, Elijah," she said, handing him one of the cups. "Really good." Elijah smiled softly, taking a sip. "We've done good," he corrected her. "None of this would have been possible without you or Charles or everyone else who believed in what we're doing." Maria nodded, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "Do you think it'll last, even after all the challenges?" "I think so," Elijah replied thoughtfully. "Not because of me or anyone else leading it, but because it's built on something solid. People want to help each other. They want to see their neighbors succeed. That's what keeps it going." As if on cue, a truck pulled into the driveway, kicking up dust along the dirt road. Out stepped Charles, accompanied by Rachel and a few members of the Harvesting Hope team. They carried boxes filled with new materials, educational pamphlets, seed packets, and instructional guides designed to teach even more farmers about sustainable practices. "Morning, Elijah," Charles called out, waving enthusiastically. "Ready for the next phase?" Elijah chuckled, walking over to greet them. "Next phase? I didn't know we were done with this one." "We're never really done," Charles replied with a grin. "There's always more work to do. But today, we're launching a new program aimed at training young farmers. We want to pass this knowledge down to the next generation." Elijah nodded approvingly. "That's a good idea. The kids are the future, after all." Over the next few hours, the team set up tables and displays in the barn, transforming it into a makeshift classroom. By midday, dozens of young people from nearby towns arrived, eager to learn. Some were teenagers dreaming of inheriting their family farms. Others were college students interested in careers in agriculture. All of them shared a common goal: to create a better tomorrow. Elijah took center stage, addressing the crowd with his usual calm demeanor. "Welcome, everyone," he began, his voice steady and warm. "Today, we're here to talk about farming, but not just any kind of farming. Sustainable farming. Farming that doesn't just feed us but also protects our land, our water, and our communities." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "Farming is hard work, there's no denying that. But it's also rewarding work. Every seed you plant has the potential to grow into something amazing. And every decision you make can shape the world around you for better or worse." The audience listened intently, hanging on his every word. When he finished speaking, Charles stepped forward to introduce the training modules, while Rachel handed out materials. For the rest of the day, the barn buzzed with activity as participants rotated through workshops on topics ranging from crop rotation to water conservation. By evening, the event wrapped up, leaving everyone inspired and motivated. As the visitors drove away, Elijah leaned against the barn door, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. Charles joined him, carrying 2 bottles of cold lemonade. "You did great today," Charles said, handing one of the bottles to Elijah. "Those kids looked up to you like you were some kind of hero." Elijah laughed softly, shaking his head. "I'm no hero. Just a guy trying to do the right thing." "Well, that's what makes you a hero," Charles countered. "Doing the right thing when it matters most. Not many people have the courage to do that." Elijah didn't respond immediately. Instead, he gazed out at the field stretching before them, golden in the fading light. After a moment, he spoke. "You know, when I first met you, I didn't think much of it. I figured saving your life was just a coincidence, something anyone would have done. And now?" Charles prompted gently. "And now," Elijah continued, turning to face him, "I realize it wasn't just a coincidence. Maybe it was meant to happen. Maybe it was supposed to bring us together, to give us a chance to do something bigger than ourselves." Charles smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting the same sense of wonder Elijah felt. "Maybe you're right. Either way, I'm grateful for it. For you." They stood there in companionable silence, savoring the moment. The journey they had embarked upon had tested them in ways neither could have anticipated, but it had also strengthened their resolve and deepened their bond. Through adversity and triumph, they had proven that kindness and collaboration could spark monumental change. In the weeks that followed, Harvesting Hope continued to expand, reaching new corners of the globe. From Africa to South America, communities embraced its principles, adapting them to fit their unique needs and circumstances. Success stories poured in daily, each one reinforcing the belief that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things when given the right tools and opportunities. Back in Alabama, Elijah returned to his simple life, though nothing about it felt quite as ordinary anymore. His farm remained a beacon of innovation and generosity, attracting visitors from far and wide. Farmers came seeking advice, journalists arrived to document his story, and students traveled to learn from his example. Yet through it all, Elijah stayed humble, refusing to let fame or recognition alter who he was. Maria often teased him about becoming a celebrity, but Elijah brushed it off with a laugh. "I'm still the same old Elijah," he'd say. "Just a farmer trying to make ends meet." But Maria knew better. She saw how he had grown not just as a leader, but as a person. The quiet, unassuming man she had married was still there. But now he carried a quiet confidence that inspired everyone around him. He had become a symbol of hope, proof that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one could predict. Years later, when historians looked back on the era, they would point to Harvesting Hope as a turning point, a moment when humanity chose compassion over greed, unity over division. And at the heart of it all stood Elijah Johnson, a humble farmer whose actions reminded the world of its capacity for greatness. For Elijah, however, the legacy wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was the everyday moments, the laughter of children playing in the fields, the gratitude of neighbors sharing meals, the satisfaction of knowing he had made a difference, however small. On a quiet evening, as he sat on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the twilight, Elijah reflected on everything that had happened. Life had taken him places he never expected, introducing him to people he never imagined meeting. Yet through it all, one truth remained constant: kindness, no matter how simple, had the power to transform the world. Beside him, Maria reached over and squeezed his hand. "Proud of you," she said softly. Elijah smiled, squeezing her hand back. "We did it together," he replied. "All of us." And as the stars began to twinkle above, casting their gentle light over the fields below, Elijah felt a profound sense of peace. He had planted seeds of hope, not just in the soil, but in the hearts of those around him. And though he couldn't predict where those seeds might lead, he trusted they would continue to grow, spreading light and life wherever they took root. The journey wasn't over. It never truly was. But for now, Elijah was content to sit back and watch the harvest unfold, knowing he had played his part in making the world a little brighter. The success of Harvesting Hope was undeniable. Across the country, small-scale farmers were thriving like never before. Crops that had once struggled to grow in poor soil conditions were now flourishing thanks to advanced technology and sustainable practices. Families who had been on the brink of losing their farms were now able to pay off debts, send their children to school, and even dream of a brighter future. Elijah Johnson's name became synonymous with hope and resilience, and Charles Whitaker's reputation as a philanthropist soared. But not everyone celebrated these achievements. In the shadows, Victor Kane watched with growing frustration. His company, AgriCorp, had long dominated the agricultural industry by buying out struggling farms or forcing them into dependency through predatory loans and monopolized supply chains. Now, with Harvesting Hope empowering independent farmers to succeed on their own terms, Victor's grip on the market was slipping, and he wasn't about to let that happen without a fight. One morning, as Elijah walked through his fields checking on the progress of his winter wheat, Maria called him over to the house. Her voice carried an unusual urgency. "Elijah, you need to see this," she said, holding up a newspaper. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Billionaire's charity scheme exposed. Is it really about helping farmers?" Elijah's stomach sank as he read the article. It accused Charles of using Harvesting Hope as a publicity stunt to boost his image while secretly planning to exploit participating farmers for profit. Worse still, it claimed Elijah himself was complicit in the scheme, painting him as a naive pawn manipulated by Charles's wealth and influence. "This can't be true," Elijah muttered, shaking his head. "They're twisting everything." Maria frowned, concern etched on her face. Who would write something like this, and why? Before Elijah could answer, another car pulled into the driveway, a reporter from a local news station, microphone in hand. "Mr. Johnson," the reporter called out, approaching quickly, "can you comment on the allegations against Harvesting Hope? Are you aware of any ulterior motives behind Mr. Whitaker's involvement?" Elijah held up a hand, his expression firm. "I don't know where these accusations are coming from, but they're false. I've seen firsthand how much good this program has done for farmers. Anyone who doubts that should talk to the people benefiting from it." The reporter scribbled notes furiously, but didn't seem satisfied. "So you deny that Mr. Whitaker is exploiting rural communities for personal gain?" "I absolutely deny it," Elijah replied sharply. "Charles isn't doing this for himself. He's doing it because he believes in helping others, just like I am." As the reporter drove away, Elijah felt a knot tightening in his chest. He knew this was only the beginning. If the media turned against Harvesting Hope, the entire initiative could collapse, and with it, the dreams of countless families depending on its success. Later that day, Charles arrived at the farm, his usual calm demeanor replaced by visible tension. "I saw the articles," he said as soon as Elijah greeted him. "This is my fault. I should have anticipated pushback like this." "It's not your fault," Elijah countered firmly. "People like Victor Kane will always try to tear down anything that challenges their power. But we can't let them win." Charles nodded, though his eyes betrayed his worry. "Victor's behind this, isn't he?" "No doubt about it," Elijah replied. "He's trying to make us look bad so he can keep controlling things his way. But we've got the truth on our side, and the support of real people whose lives have changed because of what we're doing." Charles sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. "You're right. We can't back down now. But how do we fight back without making it worse?" Elijah thought for a moment before answering. "We tell our story. Not just mine or yours, but everyone's. Let's gather testimonials from the farmers who've benefited from Harvesting Hope. Show the world exactly what this program means to them." Charles smiled faintly, admiration shining in his eyes. "That's brilliant, Elijah. Simple but powerful." Over the next few days, Elijah and Charles worked tirelessly, traveling to different communities and collecting stories from farmers whose lives had been transformed. They filmed interviews, took photos, and documented every success, no matter how small. Back at the farm, Rachel coordinated with the team to compile the material into a comprehensive report, complete with data proving the program's impact. Meanwhile, Victor's campaign intensified. More articles appeared, questioning Elijah's integrity and accusing Charles of hypocrisy. Some even claimed Elijah had staged the rescue to gain favor with the Billionaire, a ridiculous notion that made Elijah laugh bitterly. "If I'd planned all this, I'd have picked a simpler life," he joked to Maria one evening. Despite the mounting pressure, Elijah refused to lose faith. He spent hours on the phone with farmers across the country, reassuring them that Harvesting Hope wasn't going anywhere. "Don't let them scare you," he told them. "We're stronger together. Keep doing what you're doing, and the truth will speak for itself." Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. Farmers rallied around Elijah and Charles, sharing their stories online and defending the program against critics. Social media buzzed with posts from grateful participants, flooding timelines with images of bountiful harvests and heartfelt messages of gratitude. Even some journalists started investigating Victor's tactics, uncovering evidence of smear campaigns and unethical business practices. One particularly damning report revealed how AgriCorp had deliberately sabotaged independent farms by withholding essential supplies or inflating prices during critical seasons. When the public learned about these abuses, outrage spread like wildfire. Protests erupted outside AgriCorp headquarters, demanding accountability and justice. Victor, blindsided by the backlash, tried to salvage his reputation by issuing a statement denying all allegations. But the damage was done. His empire, built on exploitation and greed, was crumbling under the weight of its own corruption. Through it all, Elijah remained steadfast. While Charles handled the legal and logistical aspects of the battle, Elijah focused on keeping morale high among the farmers. He traveled from town to town, speaking at community gatherings and reminding everyone why they had started this journey in the first place. "You didn't join Harvesting Hope because of me or Charles," he told a packed auditorium one night. "You joined because you wanted a better future for yourselves, your families, and your land. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Stand tall, stay united, and keep moving forward." His words resonated deeply, inspiring renewed determination among those who heard them. For many, Elijah had become more than a leader. He was a symbol of hope and resistance, a reminder that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things when they worked together. As weeks turned into months, the momentum shifted decisively in favor of Harvesting Hope. Support poured in from unexpected places. Politicians praised the program, celebrities endorsed it, and donors contributed funds to expand its reach even further. By the time spring arrived, Harvesting Hope had grown into a global movement, touching lives in countries around the world. Victor Kane, defeated and disgraced, retreated from the spotlight. AgriCorp filed for bankruptcy amid lawsuits and investigations, leaving behind a legacy of greed and destruction. Meanwhile, Charles and Elijah stood side by side, watching the fruits of their labor blossom. One evening, as they sat together on the porch overlooking Elijah's fields, Charles broke the silence. "You know, when I first met you, I thought I was the one helping you. But now I realize you've helped me far more than I ever could have imagined." Elijah chuckled softly. "How's that?" "You reminded me what really matters," Charles explained. "Success isn't about money or power, it's about making a difference. About lifting others up instead of tearing them down. You've taught me that." Elijah smiled, leaning back in his chair. "Well, if I've taught you anything, then maybe there's hope for both of us after all." They shared a quiet laugh, the bond between them stronger than ever. Though the road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, they faced it together with courage, humility, and unwavering belief in the power of kindness. And as the sun set over the horizon, casting a warm glow across the fields, Elijah felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had also been worth every step. Together, they had planted seeds of change, not just in the soil but in the hearts of people everywhere. And those seeds would continue to grow, spreading hope and healing wherever they took root. The changes on Elijah's farm were undeniable. What had once been a patchwork of struggling crops and outdated equipment was now a thriving hub of productivity. The advanced irrigation system kept the soil perfectly hydrated, while the drones monitored every inch of the fields, alerting Elijah to potential problems before they became serious. Even the genetically enhanced seeds seemed to thrive in ways he'd never imagined, producing healthier plants with higher yields. For the first time in years, Elijah felt like he could breathe easier. But it wasn't just his own farm that benefited. Neighboring farmers who had come seeking advice found themselves inspired by Elijah's generosity. He didn't hoard the knowledge or resources Charles had provided. Instead, he shared them freely, teaching others how to use similar tools and techniques. Before long, the entire community began to see improvements, not just in their harvests but in their spirits as well. People who had once been weighed down by debt and despair started to feel hope again. Elijah, however, remained humble about his role in all of this. "It's not me," he'd say whenever someone thanked him. "I'm just passing along what I've learned." To him, the real credit belonged to Charles Whitaker, the man whose gratitude had sparked this transformation. Still, Elijah couldn't shake the feeling that accepting help from Charles came with strings attached, even if those strings weren't immediately visible. One crisp autumn morning, as Elijah inspected his flourishing pumpkin patch, a familiar black SUV pulled into the driveway. Out stepped Charles, dressed casually in jeans and a jacket, with Rachel trailing behind him, clipboard in hand. It had been weeks since their last meeting, and Elijah hadn't expected another visit so soon. "Morning, Elijah," Charles called. Out, his tone warm and friendly. "How are things going?" Elijah set down his basket of freshly picked pumpkins and walked over to greet them. "Morning, Charles. Things are good, better than good, actually. Everything you said has made a big difference." "I'm glad to hear that," Charles replied, smiling. "That's why I'm here, actually. I wanted to see how the equipment is working and talk about, well, expanding this initiative." "Expanding?" Elijah echoed, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Charles gestured toward the field surrounding them. "This isn't just about your farm anymore, Elijah. Look at what's happening here, how you're helping your neighbors, sharing knowledge, lifting everyone up. That's exactly the kind of impact I want to create on a larger scale." Elijah frowned slightly. "You mean taking this beyond Alabama?" "Exactly," Charles said, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "Imagine if we could bring these tools and resources to small-scale farmers across the country, or even around the world. Not just giving them technology, but teaching them sustainable practices that can change lives for generations." Rachel stepped forward, opening her clipboard to reveal detailed plans. "We've already started drafting a program called Harvesting. Hope it would involve partnerships with local governments, NGOs, and agricultural experts to provide training and support alongside the technology. Your farm could serve as a model, a blueprint for success." Elijah listened quietly, overwhelmed by the scope of Charles's vision. On one hand, he admired the ambition behind it. On the other hand, he couldn't help but feel uneasy. "That sounds like a lot," he said cautiously. "Are you sure people will trust something coming from a billionaire? Some folks might think it's charity or worse, that you're trying to control them somehow." Charles nodded thoughtfully. "You're right to be concerned. Trust is key, especially in communities that have been overlooked or exploited in the past. That's why I need someone like you to lead the charge, to show people that this isn't about profit or power. It's about empowering them to build better futures for themselves." Elijah shook his head, chuckling softly. "Lead the charge? Me? I'm just a farmer, Charles. I don't know anything about running programs or leading movements." "You underestimate yourself," Charles countered firmly. "Look at what you've done already. You've inspired an entire community without even trying. Imagine what you could accomplish if you leaned into it." Elijah hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. The idea of stepping into such a prominent role was daunting, but deep down, he knew Charles had a point. If he turned away now, he'd be letting down not just himself, but everyone who had begun looking to him for guidance. "All right," he said finally, exhaling deeply. "If you really think I can help, then I'll do my best. But I won't pretend to know everything. We'll need to work together and listen to the people we're trying to help." Charles grinned, clearly relieved. "That's all I ask. Together, we can make this work." Over the next few months, Harvesting Hope took shape. With Charles funding the project and Elijah serving as its face and guiding force, the initiative quickly gained momentum. Teams of experts traveled to rural areas, offering workshops and hands-on training sessions. Farmers learned how to use new technologies, implement eco-friendly practices, and maximize their yields without depleting natural resources. At first, there was skepticism. Some farmers distrusted outsiders bearing gifts, fearing hidden agendas or ulterior motives. But Elijah's presence helped ease their concerns. When they saw that he was one of them, a hard-working farmer who understood their struggles, they began to open up. His honesty and humility broke down barriers, paving the way for meaningful collaboration. As word spread, Harvesting Hope expanded beyond Alabama, reaching states like Mississippi, Georgia, and Tennessee. News outlets picked up the story, highlighting Elijah's leadership and the program's success. Overnight, Elijah went from being a local hero to a national figure, celebrated for his role in revitalizing rural America. Despite the growing attention, Elijah stayed grounded. He continued working on his farm, refusing to let fame distract him from his roots. Maria teased him about becoming a celebrity, but Elijah brushed it off. "I'm still the same person I was before," he told her. "Just doing what needs to be done." However, not everyone was pleased with the rise of Harvesting Hope. In a sleek office building in New York City, Victor Kane watched the news coverage with narrowed eyes. A rival billionaire known for his ruthless business tactics, Victor viewed Charles's philanthropy as a direct threat to his own interests. As the CEO of AgriCorp, a massive agribusiness conglomerate, Victor relied on monopolizing markets and exploiting small-scale farmers to maintain his empire. Programs like Harvesting Hope undermined his control by empowering independent growers to compete. Victor leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers against the armrest. "So Charles thinks he can play savior," he muttered to himself. "Well, we'll see how far he gets." He picked up the phone and dialed a number. Moments later, a slick voice answered. "Yes, Mr. Kane? It's time to take action," Victor said coldly. "I want you to dig up dirt on this Elijah Johnson character. Find something, anything, we can use to discredit him. And start planting stories in the media questioning Charles's motives. Make it look like he's using these farmers for publicity." "Understood," the voice replied. "Consider it done." Back in Alabama, Elijah remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. Life was busier than ever, but he welcomed the challenge. Every day brought new opportunities to help others, and that filled him with a sense of purpose he'd never experienced before. One evening, as he sat on the porch watching the sunset, Maria joined him, holding 2 cups of tea. "You've come a long way, Elijah," she said, handing him a cup. "From saving one man's life to changing countless lives across the country. How does it feel?" Elijah sipped his tea, gazing out at the golden fields. "It feels strange," he admitted. "Like I'm part of something bigger than myself. But also scary. What if I mess it up? What if people start expecting too much from me?" Maria smiled softly. "You won't mess it up. Because you're not doing this alone. You've got Charles, the team, and all those farmers counting on you. And most importantly, you've got your heart in the right place." Elijah nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. She was right, he wasn't alone. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he'd face them the same way he always had, with hard work, humility, and faith in the goodness of others. Unbeknownst to him, the greatest test of his resolve was yet to come. Victor Kane's schemes were already in motion, threatening to unravel everything Elijah and Charles had built. But for now, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to twinkle above, Elijah allowed himself a moment of peace, grateful for the journey that had brought him here and hopeful for the road ahead. The days passed quietly on Elijah's farm, but the encounter with Charles Whitaker lingered in his mind like an unanswered question. He tried to focus on his work plowing fields, repairing fences, and checking on his crops, but every now and then he'd catch himself staring off into the distance, thinking about the billionaire who seemed so determined to repay him. Maria noticed her husband's distracted demeanor and decided to tease him about it one evening. "You've been acting strange ever since you met that man," she said as they sat together on the porch after dinner. The air was cool, and fireflies danced lazily in the twilight. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Elijah shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "Nothing much. Just I don't know. It feels weird, all this attention." Maria smiled knowingly. "Well, maybe it shouldn't. You saved his life, Elijah. That's not something people forget easily." "But I didn't do it for attention," Elijah replied, his tone firm yet gentle. "I did it because it was the right thing to do. And now it feels like everyone wants to make a big deal out of it." Maria tilted her head, considering his words. "Maybe they just want to show their gratitude. There's no harm in letting them, is there?" Elijah didn't answer. Instead, he gazed out at the field stretching before them, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. Deep down, he knew Maria had a point, but accepting help or recognition still felt unnatural to him. Growing up, he'd learned to rely on himself and his family. Asking for or even accepting help from others wasn't something he was comfortable with. A week later, another unexpected visitor arrived at the farm. This time, it wasn't Rachel Meyer or anyone else sent by Charles. It was Charles himself. Elijah was knee-deep in mud, fixing a broken irrigation pipe near the edge of his property, when he heard the rumble of an engine approaching. Looking up, he saw a sleek black SUV pull into the driveway. 2 figures stepped out. One was Rachel, holding a clipboard, and the other was Charles, dressed casually in jeans and a button-up shirt. Despite his laid-back attire, he carried an air of confidence that made him stand out against the rustic backdrop of the farm. "Well, I'll be," Elijah muttered under his breath, wiping his muddy hands on his overalls as he walked toward them. "Mr. Whitaker? What brings you here?" Charles grinned, extending a hand. "Please call me Charles. And I wanted to see your farm for myself. After everything you've done, it's the least I could do." Elijah shook his hand, feeling slightly awkward. "It's just a farm. Nothing special." "On the contrary," Charles said, glancing around at the sprawling fields and weathered barn. This place has character. Hard work built it, and hard work keeps it going. That's admirable. Rachel stood nearby, jotting notes on her clipboard while observing the exchange. Elijah ignored her presence and focused on Charles. "So, what exactly are you looking for?" he asked bluntly. "I'm curious," Charles admitted, "about how things work here, about you. I want to understand what drives someone like you, someone who puts others first without expecting anything in return." Elijah laughed softly, scratching the back of his neck. "I'm not sure there's much to understand. I just try to live right, that's all." For the next few hours, Charles followed Elijah around the farm, asking questions and listening intently as Elijah explained the ins and outs of farming. He showed Charles the old tractor that barely held together, the patches of land struggling due to poor soil quality, and the makeshift tools he'd fashioned out of scraps to keep things running. Charles listened patiently, his expression thoughtful. At one point, they stopped near a field where cornstalks swayed gently in the breeze. Charles gestured to the rows of crops. "How do you manage all this on your own? It must be exhausting." "It is," Elijah admitted, "but we get by. My wife helps out, and sometimes neighbors pitch in during harvest season. We're lucky to have good people around us." Charles nodded slowly, his gaze distant. "Not everyone has that kind of support system. Most people I know, they're surrounded by yes-men and opportunists. They wouldn't understand what it means to truly rely on community." Elijah studied Charles for a moment, sensing the weight behind his words. For all his wealth and success, Charles seemed lonely, almost disconnected from the world around him. It was a side of the man Elijah hadn't expected to see. By late afternoon, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the fields. Charles turned to Elijah, his expression serious. "Thank you for showing me this. It's given me a lot to think about." "No problem," Elijah replied, shrugging modestly. "Like I said, it's just a farm," Charles smiled faintly. "To you, maybe. But to me, it's proof that there's still goodness in the world. People like you remind me why I started doing what I do." Before leaving, Charles handed Elijah a business card. "If you ever need anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out, please." Elijah accepted the card reluctantly, tucking it into his pocket without comment. As the SUV drove away, he watched until it disappeared down the dirt road, feeling a mix of gratitude and unease. Something about Charles's visit felt significant, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. That night, as Elijah and Maria sat together on the porch, he told her about Charles's visit. She listened intently, her brow furrowed in thought. "He really seems taken with you," she said finally. "Why do you think that is?" "I don't know," Elijah admitted. "Maybe because I'm different from the people he usually meets. Or maybe he just likes hearing stories about simple lives. Or maybe he sees something in you that he admires," Maria suggested. "Something he wishes he had." Elijah chuckled softly. "I doubt that. He's got everything he could ever want. Money, power, influence. What could he possibly admire about me?" Maria reached over, placing a hand on his arm. "Don't sell yourself short, Elijah. You've got something money can't buy: integrity. And that's worth more than any fortune." Elijah didn't respond. He leaned back in his chair, staring up at the stars scattered across the night sky. Maria's words stayed with him, echoing in his mind as he drifted off to sleep. A few days later, a delivery truck arrived at the farm, pulling into the driveway with a loud honk. Elijah stepped outside, squinting against the midday sun as the driver hopped out and approached him. "Delivery for Mr. Johnson," the man announced, handing over a clipboard for Elijah to sign. "For me?" Elijah asked, confused. "What is it?" The driver shrugged. "Don't know. Just following orders." Curious, Elijah directed the truck to the barn, where the driver unloaded several large crates marked with logos he didn't recognize. Inside were pieces of advanced farming equipment, drones designed to monitor crop health, sensors to measure soil moisture, and a state-of-the-art irrigation system capable of conserving water and boosting yields. Alongside the hardware was a box filled with genetically enhanced seeds engineered to thrive in harsh conditions. Elijah stared at the items in disbelief. Tucked inside one of the boxes was a note written in neat handwriting. "For your kindness." His heart sank. He knew immediately who had sent it. Charles Whitaker. Elijah sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. On one hand, he felt grateful. For the gift, it would undoubtedly transform his farm and ease many of his struggles. On the other hand, accepting it felt wrong. Like taking charity when he'd always prided himself on self-reliance. Maria found him standing in the barn, staring at the equipment. "What's all this?" she asked, her eyes widening as she took in the high-tech gear. "It's from Charles," Elijah said, his voice tinged with frustration. "He sent it as a thank you." Maria crossed her arms, studying him carefully. "And you're upset about it?" "I don't need his charity," Elijah snapped, though his tone softened quickly. "I just ... I don't want to owe him anything." "You're not owing him," Maria countered gently. "You saved his life. If anything, this is him repaying you. Besides, think about what this could mean for the farm, for us, for everyone." Elijah looked at her, conflicted. "It doesn't feel right." "Sometimes," Maria said firmly, "doing the right thing means accepting help when it's offered, especially when it comes from a place of genuine gratitude." Her words struck a chord. Reluctantly, Elijah nodded. "All right. Let's see what this stuff can do." Over the next few weeks, Elijah and Maria worked tirelessly to set up the new equipment. With Rachel's guidance and occasional visits from Charles himself, they learned how to operate the drones, calibrate the sensors, and install the irrigation system. Slowly but surely, the farm began to change. Crops that once struggled to grow now flourished, and tasks that used to take days were completed in hours. Word of Elijah's transformation spread quickly among neighboring farmers. At first, they were skeptical, wondering how a small-time farmer like Elijah suddenly had access to such cutting-edge technology. But when they saw the results firsthand, their skepticism turned to admiration and curiosity. One by one, they began stopping by the farm, asking Elijah for advice and tips. To their surprise, he shared everything freely, teaching them how to use similar techniques on their own land. Before long, the entire community was benefiting from Elijah's newfound knowledge and resources. Through it all, Elijah remained humble, refusing to take credit for the changes. "None of this is mine," he'd say whenever someone praised him. "It's just tools and ideas. Anyone can use them if they're willing to learn." Despite his modesty, people couldn't help but see Elijah in a new light. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of Elijah's bedroom, casting soft golden light across the room. He woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside and stretched lazily, his muscles still sore from the previous night's ordeal. For a moment, he lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to shake off the lingering images of smoke and flames that had haunted his dreams. It wasn't every day you pulled someone out of a burning car. After all, Maria was already in the kitchen when Elijah shuffled in, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The smell of freshly brewed coffee greeted him, along with the sight of pancakes sizzling on the stove. She turned as he entered, her face lighting up with a warm smile. "Morning," she said, sliding a plate toward him. "You look like you could use some breakfast." "Thanks," Elijah replied, taking a seat at the small wooden table. He poured himself a cup of coffee and took a sip, letting the warmth spread through him. "I didn't sleep too well last night." "Kept thinking about that guy," Maria nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think he'll be okay?" "They said he'd make it," Elijah answered between bites of pancake. "But I don't know much more than that. Guess we'll find out if they call." Just then, The phone rang, startling both of them. Maria glanced at Elijah before picking it up. "Hello?" she said, her voice cautious. After a few seconds, she handed the receiver to Elijah. "It's for you." Elijah frowned, wiping his hands on a napkin before taking the phone. "Hello?" he said, his tone uncertain. "Mr. Johnson?" Came a crisp, professional voice on the other end. "This is Dr. Bennett from the county hospital. I wanted to update you on the man you brought in last night. He regained consciousness earlier this morning and is asking to speak with you." Elijah blinked in surprise. "Me? Why me?" "He mentioned your name specifically," the doctor explained. "He seems very grateful for what you did. If you're available, we can arrange for you to visit him today." Elijah hesitated. He wasn't used to being sought out or thanked for anything. Sure," he said finally. "I'll stop by later." After hanging up, he relayed the conversation to Maria, who raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like he really wants to meet you," she said. "Maybe you should go see what he has to say." "I guess so," Elijah muttered, though he felt uneasy about the whole thing. "Still feels strange, though. Like I didn't do anything special." "Well, maybe he disagrees," Maria replied with a grin. "Now finish your breakfast. You've got places to be." Later that afternoon, Elijah drove into town, parking his truck near the hospital entrance. As he walked inside, he couldn't help but feel out of place among the sterile white walls and bustling staff. He approached the front desk, where a nurse directed him to a private room down the hall. When Elijah stepped inside, he found the man sitting up in bed, looking pale but alert. His suit jacket was gone, replaced by a plain hospital gown, but the expensive watch on his wrist remained. Dark circles underlined his eyes, but his expression brightened when he saw Elijah. "You must be Mr. Johnson," the man said, extending a hand. His voice was calm and measured, yet carried an air of authority. "Thank you for coming." "Call me Elijah," he replied, shaking the man's hand firmly. "How are you feeling?" "Better, thanks to you." The man gestured for Elijah to sit in the chair beside the bed. "I owe you my life. I don't even remember much of what happened, just waking up here and hearing how you risked everything to save me. I can't thank you enough." Elijah shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "It wasn't nothing heroic. Anyone would have done the same," the man smiled faintly. "Not everyone would have. Believe me, I've seen plenty of people turn away from trouble rather than step toward it. You're different." There was a brief pause as Elijah studied the man's face. Despite his injuries, there was something commanding about him, a quiet confidence that made Elijah curious. "So, who are you exactly?" he asked bluntly. The man chuckled softly. "My apologies. I haven't introduced myself properly. My name is Charles Whitaker." Elijah tilted his head, the name ringing no bells. "Nice to meet you, Charles. Looks like you've been through quite a bit." "You could say that," Charles said wryly. "But let's not dwell on that. Tell me about yourself, Elijah. What brings you to this part of Alabama?" Elijah shrugged. "Just farming mostly. Been doing it my whole life. It's hard work, but it keeps me busy." Charles nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "Farming is important work, essential, really. I imagine it's not easy these days, though. With all the challenges facing agriculture, climate change, market fluctuations. Must be tough." "It's manageable," Elijah said modestly, though he knew better than to downplay the struggles. "We get by." Charles leaned back against his pillows, studying Elijah intently. "You seem like a man who values honesty and integrity. Not many people like that left in the world." Elijah chuckled nervously. "I'm just trying to live right, that's all." For the next hour, the two men talked. Charles asked questions about Elijah's farm, his family, and his dreams for the future. In turn, Elijah learned bits and pieces about Charles, how he grew up poor in Detroit, built his fortune through technology, and now dedicated himself to solving global problems. Despite their vastly different lives, they found common ground in their shared belief in hard work and perseverance. Before leaving, Charles insisted on giving Elijah his contact information. "If you ever need anything," he said earnestly, "don't hesitate to reach out. Consider it repayment for saving my life." Elijah accepted the card reluctantly, unsure of what to say. "Appreciate it, but I'm fine, really." As he drove home, Elijah couldn't stop thinking about Charles. There was something about the man that intrigued him, not just his wealth or success, but the genuine gratitude he'd shown. Most people would have dismissed the rescue as luck or coincidence, but Charles seemed determined to acknowledge it. Back at the farm, Maria greeted him eagerly. "So, how was it?" "He seems nice enough," Elijah admitted. "But I still feel weird about the whole thing. Like maybe I shouldn't have gone." Maria laughed. "Why not? You saved his life. He just wanted to say thank you. That doesn't happen every day." "I know," Elijah said, sighing. "But I'm not looking for anything in return. I did what anyone would have done." Maria placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "That's exactly why he wanted to meet you, Elijah. Because not everyone would have done what you did." Over the next few days, life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be on a farm. Elijah threw himself into his work, focusing on planting crops and fixing broken equipment. Yet, despite his efforts to stay grounded, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. One evening, as he sat on the porch watching the sunset, a car pulled into the driveway. It wasn't a vehicle he recognized, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. Curious, Elijah stood and walked over to greet the unexpected visitor. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Rachel Meyer, a young woman with sharp features and a clipboard tucked under her arm. "Good evening, Mr. Johnson," she said briskly. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Elijah replied, though his brow furrowed in confusion. "Can I help you with something?" Rachel smiled politely. "I'm here on behalf of Mr. Whitaker. He sent me to check on you and ensure everything's going smoothly." Elijah blinked. "Check on me? Why?" "He's concerned about your well-being," Rachel explained. "After everything you've done for him, he wants to make sure you're taken care of." Elijah shook his head, chuckling softly. "Tell him I appreciate the thought, but I'm fine. Always have been." Rachel hesitated, glancing around at the modest farmhouse and the field stretching beyond. "Are you sure? If there's anything you need, new tools, supplies, anything at all, we'd be happy to assist." "That's kind of him," Elijah said firmly. "But I don't want charity. We manage just fine." Rachel nodded, clearly impressed by his resolve. "Very well. I'll pass along your message. But if you change your mind, please don't hesitate to reach out." As she drove away, Elijah watched the taillights disappear down the dirt road. He sighed, shaking his head. This whole situation was strange, almost surreal. Saving someone's life hadn't seemed like such a big deal to him, but apparently it meant the world to Charles Whitaker. Little did Elijah know, this was only the beginning. The sun was setting over the rolling fields of rural Alabama, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and purple. The air carried a faint chill, signaling the approach of night. Elijah Johnson leaned back against the worn seat of his old tractor, wiping sweat from his brow with the sleeve of his faded blue shirt. It had been a long day of plowing and planting, but he felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that another season's work was underway. Elijah was a man of simple habits and strong values. He lived on a modest farm passed down through generations, nestled far from the noise of cities and highways. His hands were rough from years of labor, yet they held a gentleness when tending to his crops or comforting his wife Maria during tough times. Life wasn't easy for Elijah. His equipment was outdated. His debts were mounting, and the weather often played tricks on him. But he never complained. To him, farming wasn't just a job. It was a way of life, a connection to the land and to something greater than himself. As the tractor rumbled along the edge of his property, Elijah noticed something unusual. Smoke curled lazily into the sky near the bend of an old country road about half a mile away. At first he thought it might be someone burning trash or leaves, but as he got closer, the acrid smell of gasoline filled the air. Something wasn't right. Easing the tractor to a stop, Elijah climbed down and walked toward the source of the smoke. The road here was narrow, flanked by dense woods on either side. Fallen branches littered the ground, making it hard to see clearly, but then he spotted it, a crumpled car lying upside down in a ditch, its hood smashed against a tree. Flames licked at the wreckage, casting flickering shadows across the scene. For a moment, Elijah froze. The sight of the mangled vehicle made his stomach churn. Then he snapped out of it. Someone could be trapped inside. Without wasting another second, he sprinted toward the car, dodging broken glass and twisted metal. As he approached, he saw movement, or maybe it was just a reflection of firelight. Either way, he knew he couldn't leave without checking. "Hello? Can you hear me?" Elijah shouted, his voice cutting through the crackle of flames. There was no response. Squinting through the haze, he peered inside the car. A man lay slumped in the driver's seat, unconscious and bleeding from a gash on his forehead. The seatbelt pinned him awkwardly against the roof of the overturned vehicle. Time was running out. The fire was spreading quickly. Elijah didn't hesitate. Years of working on the farm had taught him how to handle emergencies, even if this one was unlike anything he'd faced before. Grabbing a sturdy branch from the ground, he used it to smash the already shattered window, clearing enough space to reach inside. The heat singed his arms, but he ignored the pain, focusing only on freeing the stranger. Come on," Elijah muttered under his breath as he tugged at the seatbelt buckle. It wouldn't budge. Gritting his teeth, he pulled harder until finally the strap loosened. With all his strength, he hauled the man out of the car and dragged him away from the flames. Just moments later, the vehicle erupted in a deafening explosion, sending shards of metal flying in every direction. Breathing heavily, Elijah knelt beside the injured man, checking for signs of life. The man's breathing was shallow but steady. His expensive suit was torn and stained with dirt, and a gold watch gleamed faintly on his wrist, despite the soot covering it. Whoever this guy was, he clearly didn't belong in these parts. Still, none of that mattered to Elijah. What mattered was getting him help. Pulling out his phone, Elijah cursed softly when he realized there was no signal. This stretch of road was notorious for dead zones. He glanced around, weighing his options. The nearest hospital was miles away, and waiting for emergency services would take too long. Making up his mind, Elijah hoisted the man onto his shoulders and began trudging back to his truck parked nearby. By the time he reached the vehicle, sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes. Carefully, he laid the man across the back seat and covered him with a blanket he kept in the cab. Then he climbed behind the wheel and sped off toward town, praying they wouldn't run into any trouble along the way. The drive felt endless. Every bump in the road jolted the unconscious man, and Elijah winced each time, hoping he wasn't causing further injury. Finally, after what seemed like hours, he arrived at the small county hospital. Bursting through the doors, he called out for help, and within seconds, nurses rushed forward with a stretcher. As they wheeled the man away, a doctor stopped Elijah to ask questions. "What happened?" she asked, her tone urgent. "There was an accident," Elijah replied simply. "I found him in a crashed car. I don't know who he is." The doctor nodded, jotting notes on her clipboard. "You did good bringing him here. We'll take care of him from here." Elijah lingered in the waiting room for a while, pacing back and forth as he waited for news. Eventually, a nurse emerged to tell him the man was stable, but still unconscious. They wouldn't know more until he woke up. Exhausted but relieved, Elijah decided it was time to head home. He gave the staff his name and number in case they needed to contact him, then stepped outside into the cool night air. On the drive back to the farm, Elijah replayed the events of the evening in his mind. Saving someone's life wasn't something he'd ever imagined doing, but it felt natural, like it was just part of being human. He didn't expect gratitude or recognition. He hadn't done it for that. All he wanted was to ensure the man survived. Little did Elijah know, the stranger he had saved was no ordinary person. Charles Whitaker was one of the wealthiest men in the world, a visionary entrepreneur whose innovations in artificial intelligence had reshaped industries. But to Elijah, he was just a man in need of help. And that was all that mattered. When Elijah returned home, Maria greeted him at the door, worry etched on her face. "Where have you been?" she asked. "I was starting to think something happened to you." "I'm fine," Elijah assured her, giving her a quick hug. "But I found someone hurt tonight. A bad car crash. I brought him to the hospital." Maria's eyes widened. "You saved someone?" "It wasn't anything special," Elijah said with a shrug. "Just doing what anyone else would have done." Maria smiled, shaking her head. "Not everyone would have done what you did, Elijah. You've got a good heart." Elijah chuckled softly, brushing off the compliment. "Let's not make a big deal out of it, okay? The important thing is that he's safe now." That night, as Elijah drifted off to sleep, he couldn't shake the image of the mysterious man from his mind. Who was he? Where had he come from? And why had fate led their paths to cross on that lonely country road? These questions lingered in the corners of Elijah's thoughts, though he doubted he'd ever find answers. For now he was content knowing he'd done the right thing, and, so unaware of the ripple effect his actions would create, Elijah closed his eyes and let sleep take him, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring.